thank you for partnering with us. Thank you for being here this morning to help us with this very important life-affirming work. We're just very grateful for the support that we get, because you know darn well we couldn't do it without you guys. Very glad to be here. I'd like to introduce our new executive director, Jason Lee. This amazing man showed up at our door very enthusiastically wanting to become part of the team. So I'd like to introduce Jason Lee. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. I looked at some of the programs, some of the designs, some of the hard work, an incredible vision and leadership, and extraordinarily good shoes. And I'm very fortunate to be here. Thank you, Mr. Hunter, very much for your support. That, I'm going to give you a brief overview. And I say brief because if I don't watch it, I'll get into progressive mode and we'll have dialogue here. But a brief overview of some of the services and how the needs are being met through the turning point, as well as our community partners. Mental illness is lifelong. It certainly has its own unique symptoms to the individual that is experiencing mental health. Thus, recovery is lifelong. And service provisions have to be unique for those individuals at their particular state of recovery. And I think oftentimes that might go underscored. But timing and appropriate services are absolutely paramount to the recovery process. The Turning Point has been doing that for just over 2.5 decades. It's a very long time to be in the community and to address needs as they change, dealing with different climates, economic climates, and everything that accompanies that. Specifically, we start with the shelter needs, basics, from the most basic human necessities to get somebody into a place of safety, warmth, shelter, and support so they can even conceptualize who they may want to be. And that's a difficult task. And some of you in this community have seen some familiar faces over and over again over the course of many years that haven't been able to be reached to the point of accessing services. So the result is a wonderful collaboration between Turning Point, Salvation Army, Project Understanding, the Homeless to Home program, where we collectively go out to those folks on their terms, in their location, and access them at their level of comfort. And then we start to discuss potential programs and things that actually relate to them and their individual needs. That segues into our shelter, which is a wonderful shelter. It's only 10 beds for mental health that are experiencing homelessness. 10 beds. Not much if you truly look at the statistics from the homeless count, which is roughly 1,772, I believe, 30% of which are experiencing mental health. Numerically, not a lot. Not a lot. Fortunate part of that shelter, besides the incredible staff, is in the service provisions. If someone is not ready to commit to staying there, there's a drop-in center. So even if they're not in a place where they want to access full 24-hour shelter, they can at least drop in and access those services on their terms, on their schedule, in their time. Case management, therapy, the gamut of social services. I wanted to actually talk about the significance of River Haven. That's 25 elements of their alternative housing short term, but the impact is absolutely incredible. Now, if you want to talk successes, from the time of its inception till now, their income upon leaving has doubled. And that population with physical, mental symptoms that have rendered them otherwise incapable of maintaining meaningful housing. question we always ponder is what came first? Substance abuse lead to mental illness? Or did the mental illness lead to some of the substance abuse problems? Well, regardless of the origin of that, it is an issue. And it's very pervasive, not necessarily just in this community, but within the field of mental health in general. There are poll studies that places it anywhere between 89 and 92% of those that are mentally ill and on the streets have substance abuse issues. Riverhaven has a 71% success rate on recovery. Very large. Considering what this population has to go to. And there's not an incredible amount of oversight out there. That means that they feel supported enough, and we have wonderful staff in case management, but you're talking about full 24 hours, and you're talking about location, quote unquote, off the grid, so to speak. So these folks have some latitude on their lifestyle. And it always reminds me of when I first went out there. I had heard a resident unpleased with another resident because the front of his dome was unkept. And I thought, that's ownership. That is a neighborhood, that is a community, that's we don't tolerate around here. This is our community, and we want it orderly and nice. And I thought, well, that speaks to the level of care. And then if you look at the stats on their recovery, I think it's incredible. And then, to further that, I have over 63% on the latest stats have attained permanent housing. We have other programs that are equally as important, because I think it's paramount that when somebody is in need of mental health services, that they have a say in the type of services they receive. They have a say in where they want to end up, who they want to be. And with that, peer support programs are incredibly vital. We have a wellness center that does just that. We have peers supporting peers. And we've learned this through some of the chemical dependency and substance abuse models, that some of the best credibility, some of the best results are those that have experienced it along with them. And at the Wellness Center, largely driven by peers, they do that very thing. Supportive groups. They discuss how they maintain their recovery. They support each other through those processes. They, in many ways, become a family. And there's an outreach portion of that to reach some of the harder to serve populations. There's some very specific populations that have specific needs, and the Wellness Center is on a continuum to identify those needs and provide the services to them, again, on their terms, to walk with them as a partnership. And we've talked about partnership quite a bit, but it is just that. It's to partner with somebody, to give them the support necessary and the resources to walk with them through their stages of recovery, which is ongoing and oftentimes changes. Another program that I think is unique in many ways and incredibly impactful is our quality of life program. Again, with the outreach, we're going to those individuals on their terms. Quality of life, we go into the home setting, into the group home. Again, this level of care is at their comfort level. It's at their home. It's where they feel less judged, in a place where they can be relaxed and at least explore possibilities with a state of not worrying about some of the other circumstances that are accompanying outside of the clinical setting and in other ways. This program is incredibly effective for twofold. A, we go to their location on their terms, and B, it's largely done by peers. So they see a manifestation of success in front of them, working with them. And the impact is fantastic. We've also recognized that...
How was breakfast? Great. Yeah. I know I was up and at it at 5:30 this morning, and I saw want to see how nervous I'm supposed to be this morning. So I just want to see the size of the room. It was such a great honor. I got in yesterday and was given the tour of what you guys are, who you are. And one of the things that impressed me more than anything is you have everything under one umbrella. You know, many times they have homeless shelters, but nothing else. A lot of times they have housing, which is really good. But it's sometimes very difficult to take someone from the streets directly into housing. You know, there's such a decompression time. And I'll be talking about that a little bit later on. But what was really special, and by the way, I got to see people like Joe over here. Joe, it's good to meet you. You know? And Joe works for Turning Point, and what's really special about him is he has been there, done that. And, you know, whenever he sits across from somebody that says, I know exactly what you're going through, he's telling the truth. And people know that. People sense that. But I think the high point yesterday was being able to meet Carol and her husband over there. Meet them. And I cannot forget Avatar. That's right. See, Avatar is their nice, furry puppy that walks around with them. And Avatar's the best, you know. He was sitting back and we were talking about how great he is, and he was just so cute. So you gotta love that. So it's just such an honor to be a part of this. And yeah, I know some of you think that's a mental health diagnosis right now. But, you know, I remember talking to a doctor one time, and he says, you know, most people have their first break in their late teens or early 20s. He said, you're different. He said, you've shown signs of mental illness from the very beginning. And that makes so much sense. You know, one of the first things I remember is, have you heard the story of the bubble boy? The guy with no immune system, so he has to stay inside of a clear bubble. That was me. I felt like I was around people, among people, but I always felt so apart. I always felt like I was never a part of the group, never a part of whatever was going on. I felt so separated from everything and everyone. I remember one time, just as plain as if it happened yesterday, I remember going to my 7th grade school, first day, walking up, I just see exactly where I was, and walking in, everybody was laughing and talking and having a good time, and I felt, you know, okay, it's like everybody got there 2 weeks earlier, and they had a book that they all studied, you know, about how to do this and that, and somebody didn't send me the book, you know, I'm not a part of this, you know. And I always felt that way when I was growing up. And I tried, no matter what I did, to be part of things. Well, as time moved on, I spent probably about half my adult life homeless. You know, I would go into a romantic phase and go destroy the world, conquer the world. And I would fall flat on my face and lost my job. And when you don't have a job, you can't have a place. And I was constantly trying to figure out what was wrong. What is going wrong here? Well, back in about 94, 95, one of my sisters called me. And she said, Les, you know, I've been watching what you've been going through and what you're doing. And she said, you know, but they actually have help for people that have what you were going through. And I thought about it, and I did nothing. How difficult it is to start admitting that there's something wrong, that you have a mental illness. That is one of the most difficult things to do. Case in point, look at the media nowadays. When they feature somebody with a mental illness, what do they show? When they feature someone who has done some wild thing and they have a mental illness, how do they feature them? Well, that's how I felt. That was the last thing in the world I ever wanted to admit, was that was going on within me. Well, soon after that, I lost touch with my family altogether. And finally, in September of 2000, I was here in California going after a dream once again. And I was down and out again. And this cycle, over and over and over again, was getting so tiring. And I was pretty much at the end of my rope. And I thought about what my sister said. I remember what Kathy said. And I said, you know, what have I got to lose? So I went in, told somebody that I need help. Got put on the program, and things started to change. They don't change overnight, but it's definitely started an upward trend. After about a year and a half, I got permanent housing. And even though I worked through a shelter and transitional housing and got my housing, excuse me, it was still a huge, huge step. I have a saying that I say all the time, and that is, just because you give someone a key does not mean that you have ended homelessness. There's a lot going on with someone. I've heard over and over again, they said, look, they've got housing, isn't it wonderful? The clouds part, the angels sing, hallelujah, everything is fine, isn't it? No. No. There are life skills you learn on the street that do not transfer to housing. You understand exactly what I mean, don't you? Yeah. And it just doesn't work. Personally, myself, even after going through all of that preparation up to that point, I had a nice apartment, I had a couch, I had a bed, I had all these things. It took me a solid year before I stopped sleeping on the floor. And those who've been through that, you know exactly what I mean, don't you? You have your own version of that. I did. I could not sleep in my bed for the first year. But that's all part of it. And as time went on, I began to be able to share that. And knew I wasn't alone. Well, as time goes on, I connect up with Step Up on Second. And I remember when I first went there, they were giving me the tour of everything. They had a closet with a computer in it, and the CEO was actually setting up the computer so that members could get on the internet and check their email and so forth. And that was a wonderful experience, being able to see that. But one of the things after 2 months that happened was, for the very first time in my life, for the very first time, I felt like I belonged to something. I felt like I was out of the bubble. And I could be a part of something. And I could actually contribute to something. And I actually do something worthwhile for something and help something. Well, you know, I saw the computer and the thing, and my training as a computer technology anyway. I said, do you have anybody taking care of that? I'll be glad to take care of that. They said, you don't mind? Please, please. I said, no. And that grew to 2 computers. And I started a computer basic course and teaching basic computer skills. And I'll let you know, I'll give you a little, really short, quick lesson in computers. The first lesson, the very first thing I teach, if you know nothing else about computers, I want you to remember this one very important point. Computers are stupid. You know, they're a glorified machine that does all these things. It's the Wizard of Oz, you know. Let me help you pull the curtain back. See, it's just a guy sitting there. That's all a computer is. It's a glorified sewing machine. You press a button and it does what you want it to do. You know? And I like half of it because these guys come in and they get all nervous about, oh, these computers this, just a stupid little machine. And I love doing that. Well, about 3 years into it, the CEO of Step Up on Second called me into his office. And he said, Les, we want you to be a member of our board of directors. No, doesn't he know who I am? No, I don't know. So I joined the board. And I said, Todd, I don't have that much to give. All I can do is share who I am. He said, bingo. That's all you need to do. That's all we want you to do. And it was a magic point. A few years later, a big hurricane went through Houston. And I was concerned about my family. So I got back in touch. I had my half-brother, my little bro, I called him, come to visit me in Santa Monica and spend a long weekend. Now, my little bro is now like this tall, you know. And the connection started. Now, excuse me, my little bro had twins, 2 little girls. They're now 3.5 years old. I went to Houston for the Christmas holidays and got to see them. And there's nothing finer in the world than having a little angel run up to you and say, Uncle Les! Uncle Les! You know how special that is? So, oh, thank you. So, that is getting so much better. My life is getting so much better. I see that, and I move forward, and I learn. But I hope I never, ever forget where I'm coming from. Because that's the foundation of who I am. You know, with everything I do and everything I say, I always go back to the idea that first and foremost, I am a member of Step Up on Second. I deal with a mental illness. And I grow every day, I learn every day. And I just, want to let people know that that's who I am, that we're a part of our own team. Before I go, I want to mention that people dealing with mental illness, in my humble opinion, are very special people. That's not to say that to be nice or whatever, but we are. And we have special talents that no one else has. Case in point, you've heard stories that people that are blind or sight impaired have senses in other areas which are simplified and much stronger than what the average person has. Well, I'm going to challenge you this. If you are dealing with a mental illness, or know someone who's dealing with a mental illness, know that there's a part of their life that is also amplified. It's something that the world needs, something that they can give. Each and every person has that who's dealing with a mental illness. Instead of looking at it as an illness, they have a gift to give to this world. The world needs it, the community needs it, and you know what? You do too. You're special, and you really do have something to give to this world. Thank you for the honor to be here. Thank you so much.
At our gala dinner, right? So this is a room full of people dressed to the nines, right? The gala. Except for me, I don't know. Jason's way outclassing me. Clyde's already outclassing me. Too bad, I'm not changing.
Excuse me.
And I'm in my third midlife crisis. And I'm proud of that. This woman came up to me. She said, "Hi, Nick. It's so great to be here." And she was dressed beautifully. She had a necklace on, and she looked. She's gonna write us a big fat check. So we started talking, and I said, "So, what's your relationship to Turning Point? How do you come to be here?" She said, "I live at Riverhaven." And I just about fell over. So Carol, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. Cheers.
Thank you for asking me. I'm nervous. I have to say that I was originally born in Ohio. I never knew adventure even existed. I thank my husband for bringing me here. Although we just recently married, so he was my boyfriend at the time. We got to California through many travels. We went through Missouri, Arizona. We didn't like Arizona, so we ended up here because he grew up here. Ventura, 80-degree weather as opposed to the footage of snow that they have in Ohio now. I will take this any day. And, we sat on the pier for Christmas in 80-degree weather, and I said, "We're not leaving." And that's how we ended up here in California. I have seven siblings and 2 brothers. I am the only one in my family who deals with my mental illness. I grew up without any parents that knew how to deal with anything. And I had many lessons to learn. I had to learn how to live life, be responsible, be a better human being, and those lessons aren't easy to learn. And I had many hurdles to come over. And I'm grateful for Turning Point giving me that opportunity. Becky took me under her wing, helped give me a job, and I've been getting better ever since. My mental illness doesn't deter me from growing, wanting to do things. I choose not to take the medication, and sometimes it's hard doing that. But getting out of bed, knowing that there's other people out here suffering from a mental illness, gives me joy to know that they too can have what I got. So I use that as my motivation. And I'm tickled pink. I'm tickled pink to be here. I'm grateful for River Haven. I've learned many lessons there. I'm not a camper. And it is a camping environment. I grew up in the city, and I've learned many lessons living at River Haven. And I guess as long as I keep an open mind, I'll get better.